Go, run.
Live from St. Augustine, it's Saturday night! Woo!
Yeah.
All right, it's December 3rd, 2022, and our opening speaker is Dr. Paul Grimm, and he's a former Davenport graduate, and yeah, we're excited to see him. And Paul had a unique experience shortly after he graduated from chiropractic school. He spent 6 years in England with John Howat, who is considered the current father of Sacral Occipital Technique. He's written the current technique manual, the textbooks, and is considered the person that really certifies people in that technique. And Paul's got a wealth of experience. We're excited to hear him speak tonight. So without further ado, here's Paul Grimm.
I don't know if I can follow up on that. But it was funny because Jay asked me after the last talk, well, I wasn't at the last one, the one in October, he's like, hey, we need a speaker, would you like to speak? I'm like, hey, Jay, what am I going to talk about? He goes, oh, no, tell your story, it's great, it's a great story, because I talked to his wife that night, oh, tell that story, it's great. And then I thought about it, I'm like, you know what, after 25 years of practicing, if I don't have something to say, then, shame on me. So, it's great to be here. It's always a unique sort of position when you're amongst chiropractors. It's awesome. You can talk about subluxation adjustments, and that's one of the big things that I love about chiropractic is the diversity of it all. Like, you've got everyone practicing different techniques, and it all works really. I mean, it doesn't matter where you start from. Or, you like motion palpation, CBP, or I'm on the upper cervical. It doesn't matter. Like, just like BJ said, you can hit them with a shovel and they get better. A lot of it's about your intent, right? What is your intent with this patient? Like, you got to move the bone, and that's all there is to it. When you talk about, I talk to a lot of the young students out, and they're like ART and all this stuff. I'm like, it's not. I mean, it's great adjunct stuff to the adjustment. But you still have to move the bone. You still have to activate. You got to turn the power on. I think we all agree on that, and that's why I like hanging out with a much smaller select group of chiropractors, because some get it, some don't, and that's okay. I just don't want to hang out with them. And that's all there is to it. But so how I got into chiropractic really kind of goes way back. I mean, I've been practicing for the last 25 years. And like Jay said, I practiced 6 of those years in England. I had a great opportunity to hang out with John, who is, like drinking from the fountain. It's like when his dad was a chiropractor with BJ and went, was in North Africa and during World War II with his scope and like adjusting people, like, it's pretty hardcore. Like, you got to be really into it. And then so when you get that from, his son that went to school and, took a train down to South Africa on a boat to get to New York to get, it's like, that obviously you're pretty darn committed, right? So how my journey started was pretty simple, like, and I'll even step back. So I'm the youngest of 5 children. I grew up in Pittsburgh. It's interesting because my parents got divorced on Wednesday. My dad died on Friday, and I graduated from high school on Saturday. So it was a really bad year. So anyways, to kind of move forward a little bit, my mom ended up getting remarried to a gentleman who was from Pittsburgh, but he was a NASA engineer. So down here in Florida. And one of my brothers had moved with my mom, and then, I would get periodic phone calls, of course, during the winter. Hey, what are you up to? And I'm like, I'm studying for classes. I was in my 2nd year of university in a small little state school. He's like, yeah, I was just, hanging out at the beach, surfing, having a beer. You should move down here. And eventually he said that enough times that it kind of clicked. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So we moved down. We didn't know anyone. And he had previously played rugby up in Pennsylvania. And so he's like, hey, let's play rugby. It's like 30 new instant friends. It'll be great. Awesome, I can do that. So started playing rugby, loved it. But I was starting to get, a lot of issues because, it's a physical sport. And I started getting neck pain, mid-back pain. Then I was starting to get like numbness down my arm. I'm like, that's not good. And so there happened to be a chiropractor on the sidelines of the pitch one day. And they're like, you know, you should go get adjusted. I'm like, what's an adjustment? I'm like, I have no clue. I did. So it was Paul Lombardi, who's in Cocoa. Yeah, maybe not the most philosophically, sound, but he was a great chiropractor, great adjuster. And, I lay down and he's like, hey, what's good? He's like, you got problems with your shoulder? I'm like, yeah, adjusted me. And I couldn't believe the results. I was just like, this is freaking unbelievable. That's what I've got to do. So, because I had been finishing up my degree in biology, but of course I had been to so many different schools, no one was going to give me a degree. So then, fast forward a couple more months later, I decided, look, I'm going to be a chiropractor. I'm going up to Life up in Atlanta. It's closest to my house. I knew one of the guys who I played rugby with, his buddy, Titus. So anyways, he was the coach at Life. And he's like, hey, I'll hook you up. You can go up there. You can play rugby. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. So, little to my knowledge, we had hosted a tournament down in Merritt Island. Well, actually, it was Cape Canaveral. And it was the Palmer Old Boys was there. So we had played up against them. I played against Jaws and Rip and all those guys. And so I was like, hey, you know what? I'm thinking about becoming a chiropractor. I'm gonna go play rugby. I was thinking about going to Life. And Rip came up to me and he's like, if you're gonna do it, go to the best, go to Palmer. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then like took it as gospel, and I'm like, okay. And so I talked to and there was quite a few student players that were playing with the Old Boys. And one of the guys gave me the name and number of the president of the rugby club. And that's all I had. So I applied to Palmer. I got in. Never visited Davenport, Iowa. I didn't even know where freaking Davenport, Iowa was. I remember when the big floods were coming, and I called them up, like, hey, you guys okay? Or are you flooded out? Is school still on? And they're like, we're up on top of the hill. It's okay. I'm like, well, that must be a pretty big hill then, I guess. I don't know. So clueless. So I drove up 2 days. I stopped in Kentucky, visited my brother, and seen him for a while, caught up with him. Then I drove up to Davenport, Iowa. It was Sunday night. I'm in this little it was a red 91 Honda Civic hatchback full of all the shit I ever owned in my life. Clothes, whatever. It had Florida license plate. I get up on 52nd or 57th or whatever. I'm in a blacked out Shell station. I still remember it this day. I'm like, go up, because we didn't have these back then. It was like a payphone, like, beep, beep. Maybe it was a rotary, I don't know. It was Iowa. So I had the name of the guy, and I'm like, call him up. Hey, my name's Paul Grimm. I'm gonna be playing rugby for you. Can I sleep on your floor? Do you need a roommate? How about a couch? Whatever. And he's like, no. I'm like, okay, do you want to find someone I can sleep on their floor? Because I really don't want to sleep in my car tonight. And I don't know where I am. I don't know if I'm safe. Am I going to get rolled or what? It's like, he's like, yeah, okay. I'll call around. I'm like, okay. Do you want is there a bar? Is there somewhere close, so I'm amongst people so that, I don't stick out like a sore thumb. He's like, yeah. So he directed me towards halftime. And I knew I had made the right decision. When I stepped in there and they're like, happy hour, 2-for-1 drinks. I'm like, yes, I just drove 10 freaking hours up here. So anyways, I sat at the bar, had a couple beers, and eventually I get a phone call. And they're like, Paul Grimm. I'm like, yeah, that's me, that's cool. And so he goes, hey, I found you a place to stay. I'm like, that's awesome. It's like, where is it? It's like, it was 10th in Iowa. Forget the Hood. I didn't even know there was the Hood in Iowa, but apparently there is. So and you know who it was? Dirty Curdy. So it was this guy, Kurt, who had been around the rugby team for many years, had never actually, I think he attended Palmer, maybe.
Dombrowski?
Yeah, but he never graduated.
Curtis, yeah.
And so I got there. It was a room maybe this size, no furniture, I had put my sleeping bag, folded up all my clothes up along the wall, $100 a month. I'm like, I had died and gone to heaven. But it's funny. So from there, obviously everything kind of panned out and so on and so forth. But it's interesting when I look back on it. It's like, was that just like foolish bravado? Like, oh, you know, everything will work out, or like, how did that happen? And it's like, it's innate, right? It's you had someone talking to you, and like maybe you listen, maybe you don't listen, but it's always right, and it's always right on. So it just kind of all fell into place, and I think that's something that we can all agree on. And I think that if we taught that a little bit more into schools, that like, yes, there is a reasoning. Like, obviously we need to understand, you know, some red flags that, like, you know, if they're losing weight and they're, you know, got pain at night, it's probably not a patient of yours. I'm just guessing. I mean, you can help them with their subluxations, obviously, but they probably got cancer and they need to go somewhere else. But, you know, I wish that some of these younger kids had some of that feeling, and I was hoping that some of the students would be here, that they could hear, you know, that everything does work out, and, you know, miracles do happen on a daily basis in your office. I just don't think you're asking the right questions, right? You know, oh, doc, I'm doing great. Oh, that's cool. And then you start reading the paperwork. Hold on, I thought your digestive's doing better. You know, you're not getting acid reflux. You're not. You know, so it does happen. You just gotta have that intent that as you create that power, that we're just merely a vessel, right? It's just it's coming from above down and inside out. You're just like letting it pass through and let it go, and it all works out. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, whether I like it or not. But, you know, it's good to see a lot of old friends. I mean, I've known Jay for probably, I don't know, 30 years. I bump into Tony every once in a while. Not that I probably said two boos if it goes to you, but I mean, you know, see everyone around. It's great. It's great to kind of connect and to be part of a community like this. So
tell us a little bit about your working for John Howat. What that was like.
John's remarkable. John is a freaking brainiac. And so how I hooked up with John was I was at Palmer, and Josh, his son, me and him became really good friends, and we were in the same fraternity. We played rugby together, and so John would periodically kind of pop in to Palmer, and one time I was sitting there talking to him. I had just finished up my first year of Palmer College of Chiropractic, so Mr. Brainiac, I got a big brain on my head. So I was sitting there talking to him, and he knew more about anatomy and physiology and how it affected your patient's health than I've heard any chiropractor talk about. I mean, yeah, there is a thing about moving the bone and getting the power turned on, but when he can explain why the power is turned on, I'm like, whoa, like I need to understand this a little bit more. And so over the time, I just became better and better friends with him because I would just bump into him more and more. And so I just got to the point, I'm like, hey, John, like, do you have a position open? I mean, I'd love to work with you, because he had multiple doctors with him. And he's like, no, but my friend in Birmingham does. And so I ended up working with him for about 4 or 5 months, and that just all fell to pieces. It wasn't quite, that's weird. You know, you go to an associateship and it doesn't pan out. Oh, that's interesting. And so at that point in time, so this is when I was telling Jay this story earlier, is I was getting to the point, it was me and my wife, we had just moved to a foreign country, like I didn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw out. So I was sitting there, putting my rent on a credit card, and I'm like, this is not obviously gonna work out real, for very long, and I don't want to go back to America, and I want to live in Europe. I want to hang out and see the sights and do my thing. So I contacted him, or he may contact me, I can't remember. Any which way, he's like, hey, I've got a position open, do you want to come on down? I'm like, sure. So I got on the train from Birmingham down to Oxford, and then I took like a cab up there, and I don't have any money anyways. So I talked to John, and it sounded great. He's like, look, I can do this for you, I can do that, look, da-da-da-da. I'm like, John, I'd love an opportunity to work with you, you know, because you're just a brilliant, the dude had like a 4-month waiting list for a new patient. You know, people would come in from Sweden, they drive down from Manchester, you know, 3 hours and get adjusted. And I mean, he always ran behind. He was perpetually late on everything, but he was brilliant. And so I'm like, cool, I did that. And so on the way home, he's like, hey, let me give you some money for like the train and everything, and like hook me up with like, I don't know, 20 quid, 50 quid or something like that. I'm like, God, it was really, he's just a really, really, really nice guy, just soul of the earth, just cares about mankind and is still working. And well, he has quote unquote retired when I talked to him last, but you know, he's always consistently working and formulating and doing more research and so on and so forth. But yeah, it was a brilliant time. Had a lot of fun, and but you know, stuff happens. You know, my father-in-law got ill, and so we had our second child, and we had decided, okay, time to move back. But that was rough, because in England, you know, I was making a lot of coin. I was the big man on campus, and going from something back to nothing, you know, and starting a practice from scratch in Florida really sucked. And you know, it took a long time, much longer than I expected it to be, to kind of get it up and running. But yeah, it all panned out, and here I am. You know, so yeah, things just work out. You know.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so Mike's going to be setting up for his wife, Meaghan.
Oh, I'm setting up?
Well, you just have to turn it on.
Yeah, you just should be able to turn it on. Good. I was going to set the camera up.
There you go.
HDMI 3?
Oh.
Yeah, I need your phone. There you go.
All right, so our next speaker is Meaghan Longyear, and I love the name of their office. They're the Brain Optimization Center, okay? So I'll be talking to my patients that I think might be a good fit for them, and it's just like, they'll be having all these brain issues, and then I just tell them the name of the office, and they're like, that's exactly what I need. Brain Optimization Center. So without further ado, here's Meaghan Longyear.
All right, let's see if we can get this thing to work. All right, thanks so much for having me. I'm always so honored when I get to come and talk. It's usually I get to kind of follow up and be the one listening and recording for my husband, and so I'm kind of newer out of school and stuff, so this is always exciting to get to come share my story and kind of talk about what got me to chiropractic. I was not raised in chiropractic. My mom's an oncology nurse, so we're quite the opposite, where it was popping pills and, you know, hoping for the best. And so I kind of wanted to get into a little bit about my story, but first start with a joke, because we all need more laughter in today's world. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Awkward Yeti, but it is by far my most favorite comic strip out there, because it is literally my husband and I. Him the brain, go figure, and me the heart. And these just crack me up. So they're all over the place, Instagram, you can find them wherever, but they're just hilarious. Nice little chuckle. Goes through the whole system though too, like they get all kinds of jokes, the stomach and the intestines and everything. It's just hilarious. I just thought this one was just so us. And I'm like, this needs to be included in our PowerPoint. So in chiropractic, we talk about the toxins, traumas, and thoughts. And that's kind of the thought, you know, the process of like how we understand, and we go through school and learning about all this. And with all, you know, school, we're learning so much about the traumas, minor traumas, big traumas, all these kinds of things. The nutrition we go through to learn the toxins and how we're digesting our food and everything. One of the things that I loved so much was the thoughts part of it. And we didn't get a lot of that in school. And I was kind of bummed about that we didn't learn a lot about that. I mean, we know that the adjustment does a lot for that. I mean, I'm sure everybody in here can attest to having an adjustment that you just feel this like overwhelming urge to, or you do just burst into tears and it's like, whew, that needed to come out. Like that part of something was stored in there. Something was in those tissues that needed to come out and be removed. But the thoughts part, that's my passion, and that's what brought me to chiropractic, is everything kind of surrounding the emotional part of the stress that we hold in our body and how that affects us and causes subluxations. So a little bit into my backstory, my mom, like I said, was an oncology nurse, still practicing down in Punta Gorda, Florida. We didn't really subscribe to chiropractic. My dad got sent after an injury as a construction worker, and they made him go for, workers' comp, and, he did his time, and the guy, he would come home and, he'd get me my brother and I walk on his back to try to loosen up. He'd always say the hot pack was the best thing that I ever got out of that adjustment. So we were like, no, I don't do chiropractic. Chiropractic's not for me. And it wasn't until Mike made me go when we were dating, because my stiff neck that would last 3 weeks, that it goes away, babe. It's fine. It'll be fine. Don't worry. It'll go away. And he's, no, come and try this guy. He's great. He helps me out. And so I went in and nervous and scared to death that this guy's gonna, kill me. And I actually could move my head a little bit after the adjustment. I was like, that's crazy. So then I came back in. I was 3 times a week, and then 2 times. And then before you know it, I was like, these neck issues weren't happening anymore. It's like, wow, this is kind of crazy. This is pretty neat. I started noticing changes, the digestion, all these little things that, we learn about and we talk about. I was like, wow, we never had any of this stuff. Like, I never knew any of this stuff. Like, but still I'm taking my pills, I'm popping Nexium like it's candy, because I've got all these stomach issues. History of depression and anxiety for majority of my life, as far back as I can remember. And that's where it kind of was the interesting part when he decided he wanted to go to school. And I went to the first philosophy night that they had on campus. Again, knowing nothing about chiropractic other than I had a stiff neck and it went away quicker than just waiting it out. And Dr. LaMarche, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dr. LaMarche up at Life, but he was the presenter and he talked, and his passion and his excitement up there, I felt like I was like at a concert. I just remember sitting on the edge of my seat like, this is amazing. Like, why do we all not know about this? Like, all the time. This is so great. He's so excited. He's so invigorating. And then a woman came up, and I can't remember what her name is. I can still see her face. I know she lives in New Zealand now. But she got up and she started talking about all this stuff that had happened and how chiropractic saved her family and all this. And I mean, I just remember being on fire thinking, this is so cool. Like, I know my husband had a passion for it and he wanted to do this, but how cool that now we're down here and I get to start learning about this stuff. So through different things that clubs and stuff that he had been through, I learned about a technique that he had done in the club day, and he had told me how it brought up some things from his past. And this was in his first trimester, and it just stuck with me all while he was in school. It's just how something brought up something from his past. And I had been going to therapists since probably about 16, 17 years old, just constant depression, constant anxiety. Had a couple failed suicide attempts. Thank God they were failed suicide attempts, but they were attempts. So in a place that I couldn't feel like I could get to a better spot to figure out what was wrong with me. I just kind of subscribed to I'm broken and this is just it. This is how I am and nobody can help me. And at this point, we're 30 years old. So it's not like I feel like I'm gonna outgrow this, like you just you go through this in your 20s and teens, your high school years suck and then you just kind of move on. It wasn't like that. Like, I'm still having these thoughts when I get so overwhelmed and I'm like, why can I not shake this? Why am I still struggling with this? So he had told me about this technique, but I don't think he even remembered what it was called, just that he had to touch his toes. They did some arm pushing. Next thing you know, he's bringing up his injury that happened when he was 16 and he got really emotional, and then he could move further. He could stretch further and go past his toes. And I'm like, find me someone that can do this. Like, I want to try this. I want to see what that is. Why did it bring something up from your past and you didn't expect that? Like, that just kept playing in my head. So I kept, so when we ended up moving, after he graduated and we headed out to North Carolina, and he did some work there and then got the job at Atlanta and at the Neuro Center there. So when we moved to Atlanta and we found out they had a club on campus that taught, this club did Neuro Emotional Technique, and this was his technique. I apologize, let me back up a little bit and explain how I actually had NET done, because that would actually make a little bit more sense in the story of how I knew about this. Right before he graduated, he got me connected with one of his classmates, and she was about to go take the certification for Neuro Emotional Technique. And needed people to practice, and he's like, this is the technique that I had done, so if you want to try it, she's willing to try it and do it on you. And I was like, cool, sign me up. So I went and did it with her, and it was, usually when I would start crying, I'd see a sad commercial, you know, a dog got hurt or somebody lost a family member or something. That was like a 4-day thing that I was crying about. I wouldn't be able to just bounce back and like, oh, that was so sad, and I empathize for them and then I move on. I'm gonna be upset about that for days. And that was just my normal. So she does this technique with me, and it brought up something from my past, and I burst into tears, and I remember just being like, oh, that suffocating kind of crying, like I just couldn't catch my breath. And then it was like someone turned the light switch off, and I didn't want to cry anymore. And I remember sitting there thinking, why I can't get any more out? Like, I know I want to cry more. This should be now, I'm going to deal with this for a week. Why don't I want to cry anymore? And I sat up, and she did the little arm thing again, and that was fine. And then we did something else, and I cried again. And again, it was the same thing. I just didn't want to cry anymore. And I'm like, why is this happening? This is so foreign to me. I don't understand this. I don't understand why I don't feel these emotions anymore. So couldn't stop thinking about this technique. Now, she stayed in Texas. We moved across, North Carolina and then to Atlanta. And I couldn't find anybody around me that would do it. Like, it was like going to be an hour that I'd have to drive to a chiropractor that could do this technique to me. But something was different. I started noticing that I changed, like something felt different when I would be in interactions with family members. I love my dad, he's awesome, but we butt heads. We're very much alike. And at the next Thanksgiving, I didn't feel the same triggers when I was talking to him and hanging out with him. And I remember Mike and I having the conversation on the way home, like something was different. I don't know what it was, but something was just different. So when he got the job in Atlanta and we found out they had a club on campus, the thought of going to chiropractic school just kept constant on my mind. I'm working from home, doing a job that wasn't very fulfilling, but I was good at it and I was making good money. But there was just this, gosh, this is so interesting. And I knew to do this technique, you could either become a chiropractor or you could become a therapist. And I had started as a therapist when I was 18. I went to, college. My first year in college was studying psychology, and I thought, I can't sit and listen to people complain all day. Like, I wouldn't want to sit and listen to me complain all day. Like, and I've been doing this for years and I haven't gotten any resolve, so I don't know if there's any help for people like me. So, but this had done something different, and I know the power of the adjustment. And I kept thinking about what Dr. LaMarche was saying and his passion in that, and I know, of course, all going through school and the different classes. There's so much to be done with that adjustment. Now, if I can add something in with this emotional piece for people who are broken like me that nobody can help, there's gotta be something to that. Like you were saying about if you just end up in the right place at the right time. Like, we went for his job, but I still think maybe we got there because maybe I was supposed to be there too. And it wasn't, it definitely was for the job, of course. But I needed to be there, because if we'd stayed in North Carolina, I probably just would have never done this technique again. And who knows if those suicidal tendencies had come back and stuff like that. That stayed with me even through the first couple quarters in school. I still would get so overwhelmed with these classes and failing a test and feeling like I'm not good enough. I mean, here, like the thought of you couldn't even commit suicide properly. So you're awful at everything. And then trying to take classes, and my husband got 4.0s all through school, and I'm sitting here with biochem going, are you kidding me? This stuff is hard. How do people put this together? I thought this was gonna be easier. He made it look like it was easy. It was not. I couldn't get rid of those feelings, but I kept doing the technique, and I found people that would practice with me, and we practice. But the difference and the reason I'm so glad that I got into chiropractic and not into therapy, a lot of my close friends that do this technique are therapists, and I learn a lot from them, is because we would adjust each other afterwards and address certain segments of different organs that we're holding on to in our body, these emotions, these stressors, these things that are keeping us from being vibrant and being free and being able to let go of these things that we're holding on to from our past, and we're actually able to be more present in our environment instead of kind of ruled by the things that are, have happened to us in our past. So it was so great being able to kind of walk through and realize how much I was shifting, but then being able to help my classmates as well as we're struggling through learning and, are you thrusting hard enough, or are you doing all these things right? And then being able to work on that. Some of the biggest things we worked on was statements like, I'm okay becoming a doctor. None of us were okay becoming a doctor. Not one of us was okay with that. but we're all going through this, and we all want to go out there, we want to help serve people and help them, but we're not congruent with that statement. Consciously, we're like, yes, I'm gonna be great, and then underneath we're this scared little kid because we didn't make the cheerleading squad, or I didn't make the football team. So all these bad, memories from our past that we're over it and we've moved on, but we're not, because we know in that limbic brain that that's all still kind of playing and keeping us in that place of fear whenever something kind of kicks up and gets you in that limbic windup, that as we call them, limbic loops. So being able to use the adjustment now while doing that technique is just amazing. Like, moving into kind of where I am in practice, it's wild seeing the differences and knowing that I get to make that much more of an impact than had I chose, another route and done something. Therapists, they're great too, and they have a purpose, and we co-manage with a ton of them. But I get to do stuff that fires into their brain and wakes up areas that haven't been stimulated and need that extra oomph of pizzazz. But now we just moved an emotion out of the way that was holding you back anyways. So it's sometimes surreal to actually look at the journey of how I even got here. Because if you had told me 15 years ago that this is what I would be doing, I would have laughed at you. Like, I'd go to a chiropractor, but I could never be one. I could never do this kind of stuff and help people. But through working through literally years of crap that nothing that was that big. A lot of people that I work with have had huge things that have happened with them that I can see why they've been held in these places of fear. Like big things. Me, I had a great upbringing. I had great parents. I went to a good school. I had nice people around. I had bullies and crap too, but everybody has that stuff. That's just normal. So why did I feel like I was so broken? And why did I feel like I couldn't be helped? And there's so many people out there that I see on a regular basis that we all hear about. We know the mental health these days is just complete crap with everything, especially after the pandemic that we went through. And I don't want anybody to feel like they are in that space. I don't want them to feel like they're broken and that they can't be fixed, because everybody can. I truly believe that with every ounce of my body. We all have potential. We just have to move things out of the way. We do that with the adjustment. We do that by changing our nutrition. We do that by joining groups that fulfill us, and sports teams and different things that bring you passion and joy and excitement. This, I feel like, was just the missing piece for what is it that's kind of holding you back, that's not allowing you to be vibrant and to be in your power. I still look back and think I had blinders on and I just chugged through. Like, the universe just shoved me into this, and here I am. Like, I don't remember filling out paperwork to apply for chiropractic school. Thinking back now, I'm like, how did you do that? Like, literally have no concept of how I did it. The tests were so hard. Everything was such a struggle, but I did it, and I truly believe it was because this is my purpose. This is what I'm supposed to be doing to help people that are out there. And especially, like you were saying, when there are extra things, like we get a lot of referrals from chiropractors because this isn't everybody's cup of tea to do this stuff and sit here and have people crying in front of you. Like, people are crying in my desk in my office every day. And the more crying, the happier I am, because I know you just moved crap out. Now you blew it into a tissue, threw it in the trash, and that's not a part of you anymore. And now when you're done, you can go back out there and do something, even more exciting and be more vibrant and live your life better, be a better parent, show up better for your family, whatever it is, but not be held back by fears because of things that have happened throughout your life. And, again, coming back, that I get to do that adjustment with it too. So people come in and they don't realize we're chiropractors. Like, they'll ask me, like, you're my therapist, right? And I'm like, oh no, I'm a chiropractor. You're gonna lay down and we're gonna adjust your spine. We're gonna go put you on a brain tap. We're gonna calm your system down afterwards. We're gonna give you exercises and things that you have to do. But first, we're gonna move out some things that are holding you back so that you can show up more. You can be more present. You can do the things that you don't think you can do because you're being held back by fear. And we hear that every day. We hear people, if you just listen to people talk, you can hear them when they say, well, I can't do that. Well, this is, this scares me, or this pisses me off. So that's not something that's something that there's a trigger there. There's something that triggers you that's challenging you in a way that we need to be able to address that. Sometimes just having somebody think about what their problem is, I'll just lay them down and adjust them like that. I won't even do the technique. Sometimes we don't even need to do the technique. Just bringing that awareness and then putting that force into the spine and allowing the body's innate to do what it does. Sometimes we need to get a little bit more in there. We need to dig around and we need to pull some things out and help at a deeper level. That's what I needed. I truly look at this with chiropractic saved my life. If I hadn't found this and we had stayed in North Carolina, I don't know that I'd be here still today. I really don't. But I got an opportunity to go to school and get to be here and do, gosh darn it, I wasn't supposed to cry. I'm ecstatic at the journey that I've had, that I was able to have someone force me to go get adjusted and to have to do something that I was scared to do, and then be able to continue finding different avenues, but not giving up. And truly believe that my purpose here on earth, and I will do it until the day that the good Lord takes me back. I just want to help people. I want to get them through those emotional things, and I have people suffering like I felt like there was no hope for me, and that nobody understood. And that's, I think, one of the hardest things is when you feel like someone doesn't get it, and nobody seemed to understand me. And I felt broken, and I know my parents felt like, they did the best that they could, and then I would feel bad that I didn't do enough for them to show them that it wasn't you, it wasn't, you didn't do anything wrong. It was, it was me. It was something wrong with me, that I was broken, but really it wasn't. I just had a bunch of irrational fears that built up over time and stored in that beautiful limbic brain that we all have. And so, moved things out of the way and cleared some stuff that just didn't need to be there and wasn't serving me anymore, and ended up on this side. So I still don't know how I got through that program. We were just talking about that earlier with Dr. Danita about boards and how hard that stuff was. And I swear, if I hadn't had NET, literally seminars 2 weeks before every boards that I took, I don't know if I made it onto the other side. I did so much work trying to get through that because of all those past failures, feeling like I wasn't worth it, I wasn't worthy, I wasn't good enough. Who am I gonna help? Can't even help myself. I'm having all these, and here turning out on the other side. So it's been quite a journey, and I'm glad to be on this side of it. And I think I kind of just ran through, like a little off track on there. I pulled a mic here. I usually have. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I didn't even notice. So yeah, that's the biggest reason why I'm so passionate, and I love the brain. Like, I love that my husband has given me so much knowledge, and I feel like even that isn't a mistake, that happened, that he had his injury, and we found our way together. He went down the neurology rabbit hole. He can explain so much in the depths of what the adjustment is doing and how it's affecting different lobes of the brain. And it just so happens that the limbic brain, that's my world. That's everything. It's where so much of us, 95% of the time you're in that space. Those thoughts that are going through your head that you don't even realize are going through your head, because it's just this unconscious chatter. It's all programs. It is literally just programs playing. Some of them make it to your conscious mind, but most of them don't. So being stuck in that space, like, we need to be able to fire up that frontal lobe. We need to be able to, bring more expression to a person. But we know that when we're in that limbic brain, we're just surviving. That's our survival brain. The animals all have that. We're the ones with this higher center. So being able to adjust a person after removing some interference and really wake that up. Oh my God, we have the coolest job ever. We all know that, but so yeah, the subconscious mind, just programs that are playing in our mind over and over and over again, but they're not positive programs. It's these programs that are keeping us from dying. It's keeping us to tomorrow. We have to survive to tomorrow. I had a patient yesterday, actually, that Mike's been working with for POTS. And she had made a comment about when we did the NET about, how does this even correlate? This doesn't make any sense to me, how I would have any kind of frustration towards my father, and this, that came back to frustration around, not being able to get out of something, or being able to get away from something, or something happening fast enough. And she goes, I didn't like going to my dad's, her parents were separated and divorced, and I didn't like going there, but I did, because it's my dad. And so I went there, and I dealt with what I had to do. And then she's like, well, I'll just see myself at that age, Dr. Mag. I trust you that this stuff works. And so she preps herself. She's sitting there thinking, and then as I'm about to adjust her, she goes, oh my God, I know what it is. I know what it is. And I'm like, okay, what is it? Normally I don't like people to talk. Don't talk, because then you're in your conscious brain. Stay in that limbic brain. Let's process. She said, I hated going so much that I just kept thinking about, I just need to get home. I just need to get home. I just need to get home. And she just burst into tears. And I was like, beautiful, just keep breathing. Just see that little girl wanting to get home. That's all she wants to do. And adjust her, and she came up, she's like, this stuff is just so weird, I don't understand, but I feel so much better. And just a deeper piece to get into something that she's been dealing with that left her with, going to a bunch of different people for POTS and not getting any help. We're trying all the things. And here with what he's doing with adding in this limbic component, it's like, all right, so let's move some stuff. Let's wake your brain up in a way that it hasn't been before and see what kind of awesomeness we can, bring out for you. So that subconscious mind, we hear about it everywhere. It's huge and we're stuck there so much of the time. So I put up I don't know, anybody in here, have you guys heard of NET? I know some people have heard of Neuro Emotional Technique. So I brought up I wanted to find a post. It didn't come out as clear as I wanted to, but just because the patients, and I love being able to show them like the different sequences of like how we will adjust them. Like I use a double-headed activator that I adjust them while they're processing through their emotions. And then a lot of times I'll do, further adjustments depending on, where they're at and, whatever the situation is going on with them. But they always get adjusted when they're in the processing, when they're thinking about it. If they're in that, that anger space and, we're working in that liver meridian, and to be able to, activate, different areas in the thoracic spine versus, other areas. And just how many people will sit up and say, it's like that adjustment, I just felt like it opened up a door. Like I just felt like I could breathe. It's like amazing. Like that's so deep to me that just, none of the other docs that do this technique get to get that kind of satisfaction, to get that deep into something. Maybe they were just right there on the edge and that adjustment helped them get just a little bit further to be able to let go and not hold on to that and harbor that anymore in your body, in your, the stress in our tissues. So I wanted to put that up just to kind of show like just how many different emotions there are. In the column right here, the 90%ers, this is 90% of the time what we're dealing with, but that whole section next to it is the other emotions that, that we harbor in those organs, in that space. Even if the organ was taken out, even the people that come in and they say, I had my gallbladder removed, my first question is, who are you resentful towards? Because gallbladders hold that resentment energy. Who are you resentful towards? And, oh, my ex-husband, this, that, and the next thing. And they just come out with it. Like the body doesn't lie. It tells us, it gives us those clues. And then having these sequences of, how to kind of be specific with that adjustment when they're processing. It's been pretty wild being able to, only been out now 3.5 years. So it's still like mind blowing every time somebody has some big thing, you hear about these miracles that happen and it's like, am I gonna get one of those, will I get to see those kinds of things? Holy cow, like it's amazing. It happens all the time. It's crazy to see the things that we get to see in our profession. And then one of the posters that we actually have, this one up in our office, and I'm happy to send any of these to anybody who's interested. I love when patients will be standing out there in our waiting room, and we deliberately put it out there so that they could look at those different things, and they'll say something about, oh my shoulder's been bothering me, and that's exactly how I feel, burdened and overwhelmed. A lot of times they've got tears in their eyes as they're sitting here looking through the thing, just putting it together that my body's telling you stuff. It's telling me what I need to know to investigate. Now, don't throw a pill at it, don't go have surgery on it, but let's investigate. Why is it that you're holding that burden? Why are you holding that overwhelmed feeling, or the fear or the anger or whatever it is? The body tells us things, and these kinds of things where it's been really neat seeing their responses to it. Even the ones that want a research article for everything, which is great because he will have all the research articles, and that's just not my jam. I'm gonna feel my way through this and see how things. But I know we need to have that kind of stuff, and I appreciate that we do, but this kind of stuff people relate to and they can understand, and it's like, that's my problem, and it's on a poster. So how does that make sense of me and what I'm feeling? And so that validates that I'm not the only one and I'm not broken. And I wish I had things back in the day like this that I would have known about, so that I could have had a little bit more comfort in knowing that, oh, it's not just me, that they obviously put things together like this because other people are suffering too. So obviously Neuro Emotional Technique is my passion, and I hope that I can do it. As long as my arm can lift and I can muscle test people, I will be doing it. I hope to be like in my 90s still doing NET and adjusting people. That would be the greatest joy for me. I don't ever plan to retire. Dr. Walker started the One Foundation, which is the research group, and they're actually bringing out quite a lot of research, which has been very interesting to me. That the first research that they did bring out was with cancer patients. And one of the things that I had like these, like, you know, I don't know any anatomy at this point. I haven't started chiropractic school, so I don't know anything. I kept having these thoughts of little black spots in our body that we might be harboring, and that this, you know, breakdown or bad things, I don't know. I just used to visualize these black spots in our body, and that it was like, could our stresses, could our traumas, could our like emotions be causing sickness? I didn't know anything at this point. I was still, you know, you got a stomach ache, you pop an Nexium, you know, that's the solution. And these thoughts kept coming up. So when that first research came out, it was like another just, yes, you are on the right path. Like, you had this weird abstract thought, didn't understand what it all meant, and now here they are doing things, you know, trying to explain this and try to kind of, you know, show how, you know, they have functional MRIs that, you know, were showing that when they're reading the story back to the cancer patient of their story of hearing that they have cancer, how they responded to it, and the functional MRI showing that limbic brain lighting up, specifically the parahippocampus. And then after doing the technique for an X amount of treatments, that same functional MRI was showing that area wasn't lit up anymore. It wasn't something that was stimulating that survival brain anymore. Awesome. But they went on to find the frontal lobe and the cerebellum were lighting up, but I don't know what all came of that research, or if that's still coming out. But higher centers of the brain now were lighting up. Great. So we're seeing how people can actually be more in that thrive space instead of that survival space. That's fantastic. So all of that research and stuff that they're coming out with is on the foundation. But what I always have our patients try to do before they come back for their report of findings is to watch the stress documentary to get an idea of kind of what we all have, such an understanding of chiropractic and how the body works and physiology and all of that stuff. But it's a very interesting documentary how they put it together to really explain how we harbor these things, how people coming back from war with PTSD, how they're harboring these things and how that part of the brain is activated, how people getting diagnosed with something, how that activates different areas and how that stores in your mind, and how that, by not being able to let that stuff go, how that's, you know, keeping you at a more lower vibration, keeping you more in that survival brain, keeping you outside of being in that thrive space. So, and Dr. Walker's just adorable. He looks like Santa Claus, and he's talking on the thing, and so he tells his story about it, and Dr. Debs as well. And so it's a really good documentary. So I wanted to put a slide up here. Anybody who's interested in, you know, learning a little bit more about it, or even, you know, hearing the things that they're doing with the research and stuff like that, with low back pain and stuff like that. They're doing a lot of stuff with that in the adjustments. So that's me. That's my story and all my stuff. So thank you for letting me speak to all of you guys and everything.
Thank you very much. Tonight we have a special guest in our area. We have a chiropractor from Alaska that's visiting St. Augustine. He has been very active politically. You were the president of the Connecticut Chiropractic Association?
I was an examiner. And
the chiropractic examiners.
We started the CCC at my office, a couple of other things like that.
And the chiropractors in Connecticut are very instrumental politically in the United States, meaning Connecticut has actually been faced with people that don't want there to be chiropractors. They don't want you to have the freedom to select the kind of health care that you want to get. And chiropractors like Dr. Piana and some colleagues of his went to the State House in Connecticut. They helped to save Connecticut chiropractic, as well as the ability for people to choose to go to a chiropractor, which in the state of Florida, where we have very good laws and very good healthcare laws, that doesn't seem like, it's hard to grasp that concept, right? But this is something that's very real. In the state of California, in the state of Connecticut, people's rights or their ability to select the kind of health care they want to receive are being taken away. So Dr. Piana is very instrumental in helping to preserve those rights. He also most recently in October was the commencement speaker at the Palmer College of Chiropractic Davenport graduation, where his son Palmer graduated in the October 2022 class from Palmer. So without further ado, here's Dr. Tony Piana.
Thanks, Jay. There's a lot of ground to cover there with the Alaska commencement and the Connecticut thing and all that other stuff together. So I'll address some of it and then I'll just talk whatever I'm going to say. So, yeah, in Connecticut, the thing is it's a small state. It's very much like California politically today with laws and things like that. So they come and test things in Connecticut and then they instill them in California and then the rest of the country adopts them slowly over time. So it is important, the stuff we did there. In fact, it was actually kind of sad because we took money out of our own pockets to fight these people from, actually one guy was from Florida, Dr. Bellamy was his name, from Florida. He was a single member LLC from Florida that came to Connecticut to say chiropractors were causing strokes. And then not only that, on every bus in Hartford would be chiropractors kill strokes, create strokes, something like that. And billboards over I-95 in Connecticut, it was crazy. So we had to fight this by ourselves. Like the ICA didn't come in, nobody came in to help us financially. So we all had to throw out our money, go to these hearings, hire, what's the guy's name? David Cassidy, who did that study on stroke.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, Cassidy study. So we hired him to come there, and there was this other guy, he was a pediatrician from Toronto, Canada, and he came down. So you had a guy from Florida, a guy from Toronto, he's a pediatrician, Bellamy's an orthopedic, coming there testifying about how chiropractic causes strokes. So we hired a decent attorney, and she was, I'm not gonna tell you the whole story, that's not what I wanna talk to you guys about, but it was kind of interesting how this pediatrician is up on the stand and our attorney gets up there and says, well, you know, what's his name? I can't remember. Murray Katz. Yeah. And he comes and he's like, Dr. Katz, you know, what's your interest in chiropractic in Connecticut? You're a pediatrician from Canada. So, oh yeah, whatever, you know. Same thing with Bellamy, single member LLC. It was like an anti-quackery type thing. Yeah. And well, you know, whatever. So he goes on, and the big thing was, even though a stroke is 1 in 500,000, or about that, there is an association with the chiropractic adjustments in a stroke, all right? But Cassidy came up and said, no, you're just as likely to have a stroke walking into a medical doctor's office as a chiropractor's office because you're going in there with prodromal symptoms like neck pain, headache, whatever. So you're just as likely the next day to have a stroke, whether they gave you anything, nothing, or you got adjusted. Okay, so that was the study that we went by. It's a well-accepted epidemiological study from Canada. But it was funny because she puts him on the stand, Dr. Katz. Dr. Katz, do you do circumcisions? He's like, well, yes, I do. Is there any, have you ever had a patient die from a circumcision? He's like, you can tell he didn't want to say yes, but he had to say yes. Yes, I have. Oh, well, you know, what's the incidence? He said, well, about 1 in 500,000. He goes, oh, do you have your patient sign a waiver, you know, informed consent for that? He's like, no, I don't. But you're here in Connecticut asking for people to sign informed consent for a stroke with chiropractic. That's what the whole topic was about. Anyway, that was pretty cool how she did that. So we did a lot of that, and I can't even take all the credit. I can't take nearly as much credit as some of my other colleagues in Connecticut. So if anybody's watching the video, they were the guys. I was there, but they were the guys, right? So that's that. Yeah, so then I ended up somehow recently in Alaska. It's kind of interesting. I come down here for a couple of months to get out of the dark, not necessarily the cold. Here I am. But all right, so Jay, I'll tell you a good story about Jay. I graduated, I think a trimester ahead of him in '91, and he moved to Charleston, and he was there practicing, and he was working for Willis Chiromed. And I remember I went in there, he had this neuroplastic change room or something and all this stuff, and he was doing really well. He was making pretty good money, and I'm like, Jay, why don't you get your own practice? What are you doing, you know? And he's like, oh, I don't know, you know, it's too easy to make the money he was making, having fun in Charleston and all that. And I just said, Jay, you know, we've been friends for a long time. I said, if you don't open your own practice within the next 6 months, I'm going to break your nose. Right?
That's true.
And that was his motivating factor to open up his practice. That was pretty funny. And then he came here and he opened up a practice in St. Augustine. You could tell him the numbers you were seeing early on. I don't know if that's your information to tell, but it was a lot of people. He did really well. So it was worth it, you know, having friends like this to, you know, to look at and count on, right? So I got a couple of funny stories. Let's end this with some humor. Played rugby at Palmer. It was 1989 or 1990. and Life came down to play again, came up to play against us in Davenport, Iowa, and we all heard Sid Williams was going to be there. You know, Sid's going to be there. Like, oh, I've heard about this guy, you know, and so we're out there, and I remember we were playing, and 3,000 people were at Credit Island. It was a big turnout.
Wow.
Okay, it's like because Sid was there, and Life, Palmer game. We got crushed, but I remember getting tackled over in the tri-zone here, and I did ding. I had a concussion, obviously, or something. And I look up way across the other side of the field, and I see this light coming out of the sky, and there's a guy with a white suit on. I said, oh, and just casually, oh, that must be Sid Williams. With all these people in the crowd. And then sure enough, after the game, I got up, and we all got to meet him, and it was him, the same suit, everything. So it's pretty wild, you know, like that. There is something to all this, right? So maybe 10 years later, I went to Stanford Marriott, Connecticut, and we were at a seminar with this. We started the Connecticut Chiropractic Council, so we got to meet with all the people. We were at the Marriott upstairs, and Sid, it was just me, Sid, Adam Church, maybe, I don't even know if he was there, but people like that.
Yeah.
George Curry, and we're all sitting there with him, and we're drinking. Sid's drinking his face off, and no, maybe he's drinking. But we were probably drinking our face off. So we're sitting there, and like he's getting loud, and he's laughing. If you knew who he was amazing. And I said, I got to get up there and tell him my story about that rugby game. So I get up there, and I'm telling him, like, said, I got to tell you the story. So I tell him the story, and he's, oh boy, he goes, that's funny, and he slapped me. That's funny. So I just lit up out of the sky, right? Ha ha ha. And he's like really kind of rude about it. I was like, man, I've been waiting for years to tell him this story. And that's just what happened. So then about, I don't know, 5 years after that maybe, I'm in Chicago airport flying back for homecoming in Davenport. George Curry's over here, and we were talking, and he said, you know that Sid over there, right? I'm like, oh yeah. And he was with Nell, his wife Nell. And I'm like, oh, okay. And ends up being, I'm on the plane here, like these are the 3 seats on my side. Me, Sid, and Nell. So I had 45 minutes to sit next to him, right? And I introduced myself, and I said, you were at the Stanford Marriott, and I gotta be honest, you were a little rude. You know, I was telling you the story. And he's like, oh boy, I remember that, you know, and because there could be a whole plane full and everyone's quiet on the plane. Not Sid, he won't be quiet. You know, he screams. And he's a little hard of hearing too. So he talks even that much louder, right? So Nell says, hey Sid, why didn't you tell the boy about the time you invented the face mask in football? He's like, oh, and he slaps my leg. Boy, he goes, I was at Georgia Tech playing football. I don't know what year that was, 20s maybe. He's like, and we had helmets, right? We had helmets. Kind of like the rugby ones today. We had helmets, and there was no face piece, and some boy broke his face or whatever he did. He said, I know what we should do. We should put a bar across the helmet and protect the face. And sure enough, I found out later that he did invent the face mask, right? At Georgia Tech. I'm like, all right. It's interesting. Cool. There was another story. The last one I'll tell you, there was one in between. Can't remember the one in between. But anyway, so the last one, he told me 3 stories. The last one was really weird, like, because here I am in this plane, and he's from the deep south, grew up in probably the early part of the 19th century, 20th century, right? 1900s. So Nell's like, hey, tell the boy about the train in Alabama. He goes, oh boy, he goes, well, there was this train. I mean,